Okay, so we are moving into the digestive system. So that is the packet that you should have with you currently. When we talk about the digestive system, one of the concepts that I want you guys to kind of get a hold of before we really start the conversation is that when you guys put any type of food or drink into your body, how it initially goes in is generally not in a form that our body can do anything with. And that's essentially why we have the entire process of digestion. So when you guys sit down to a meal and you put that food into your body, the bonds between the molecules in those foods that you have eaten are simply too big, and our body can't access or tap into any of the energy or other things that are available within those foods. And so when we talk about digestion, what we're trying to do is take those different foods that you guys have put into your system and break them down to get them to the point that we actually can get some sort of benefit out of them. And so it's a series of steps. Some of them are repetitive, but all of them are geared at taking that food, breaking it down, and getting it to its smallest, simplest form so that the body can then sort through it and take what it needs and use that to build new tissues, to build new cells, whatever it might be that the body needs at that particular time. And that would make sense if you stop and think about it, because if we simply could use the food in the way that it went in, then we would have body parts that were made out of those foods. And that's not the case. You don't have body parts that are made out of the specific foods that we eat. We pull components from those and we rebuild that into something that our body can actually put to use. So, looking at the packet, um, the process of the digestive system, about midway through that first slide, it talks about some of the different functions. So, ingestion, propulsion, absorption, and then ultimately defecation. So, with ingestion, obviously, we have to get that food into our body in the first place so we can start the process of digesting it, breaking it down, and getting it into the smaller components. Propulsion, food doesn't naturally just move through the body. We have to have a method that is going to keep that food moving forward so we can continue to process it, continue to digest it, and work it into a usable form. So when we talk about propulsion, that is moving the food from the mouth down to the stomach, from the stomach to your intestinal tract, and then through the intestinal tract. When you guys stop and think about the intestinal tract, you have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 26 feet of small intestine, and it's going to take some sort of mechanical process to push that food through those 20 plus feet of small intestine. Large intestine isn't quite as long, but again, you have to have a method of propelling it and moving it in a forward fashion. After that, it talks about absorption. When we talk about the process of digestion, and most people assume that when they can't see the food anymore, that it is internal. And that's not truly the case. The food is not considered to be internalized until it makes that transfer from being in your stomach, in your small intestine, and actually has been absorbed and transferred into the bloodstream where you now can do something with it. So until that exchange has happened, it's not considered to be internal. Just like when we talked about breathing, even though you take air into your lungs, until it transitions into your bloodstream, that is not internal respiration. So the same sort of policy applies when we talk about the digestive system. And then ultimately defecation. We already talked about the fact that nothing works at 100% efficiency, and that's the same case here. There are certain things that you are going to put into your body that we can't do anything with. And one of those things is cellulose. There is nothing in the human body, even as strong as our stomach acid is, that can digest and break down cellulose, which is a common component in a lot of different plant material. We don't have anything that can break it down. And so when you put cellulose-based foods into your body, if you chew it, you can break down that cellulose to get to the other material that is present in that food, but the cellulose we can't do anything with. And so that would pass through our system and we would eventually have to eliminate it. And so the process of defecation is just removing those things that our body no longer can use or never had a chance to use. The bottom of page 1 shows an image of the digestive system, and it's divided into two sides. On the left-hand side, you have what are known as the accessory organs, and on the right-hand side, you have the alimentary canal. Now, the left side with the accessory organs, that is identifying those structures that help or assist with the process of digestion, but don't actually come in direct contact with the food. So in the accessory organ side, you have the salivary glands. We're going to talk about those a little bit more as we move forward in the packet. You also have the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. So each one of those structures has something very beneficial to add to the process, but doesn't interact with the food in a direct manner. On the other side of that, you have the alimentary canal, which is essentially a tunnel through our body. If you guys have seen where they've taken a mountain and put a tunnel through the mountain and you can drive through it, that's what our alimentary canal is. It is a tunnel through our body that food will pass through. And like I said, some of it will go in and it will come out, and it doesn't actually ever become internalized because it never gets to the point where it's moved into our bloodstream and we can access or tap into any of the benefits from that. So looking at the alimentary canal, you have the mouth, which is obviously where food is going to enter. And then we go to the esophagus, which is going to transfer food from the mouth down to the stomach itself, into the small intestine, the large intestine, and then eventually being eliminated from the body. Now, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on those because we are going to talk about those structures as we move through the packet. So go ahead and flip over to page number 2. For page number 2, it gets a little bit more into the alimentary canal, shows it in a little bit different manner by indicating the links that are associated with each one. And starting out with the tongue down into the esophagus and the stomach, that is relatively short, gives you the dimensions there. But then we get into the small intestine. And the small intestine, it does vary in range. Women to men will have slightly different lengths. And you'll see, different ranges put on that, but typically 20 to 26 feet is going to be how long your small intestine is. And as it moves through the intestine, there are 3 main parts that we have with the small intestine. You have the duodenum, which is going to be the section that comes right off of the stomach. So there's a little bit of a curve coming right out of the stomach. And then it's going to move into the jejunum, and then the last and final part before we transition into the large intestine would be that ileum. At the point where we get the small intestine transitioning into the large intestine, you'll notice that that is where the appendix is located. Now, this is not to scale on how it would be in the body. It's a little bit different setup, but this is just showing you how long everything is. And then when we get into the large intestine, the small intestine is going to be wrapped up at the core of your abdomen, and the large intestine actually kind of frames it. So it comes up one side across your midsection and then down the other side, just like I said, kind of framing it out. And then we have the anus, which is going to be how food or waste material would exit the body. Now, the second slide that you guys have on page 2 talks about the mouth. And there's a lot that happens within the mouth structure. And it is really very important to the beginning part of the process of digestion. When you initially put food into your mouth, that is where digestion starts in a couple of different ways. And if you look on page 3, I'm going to kind of combine these slides together. So on page 3, it talks about chemical and mechanical digestion. So when we look at mechanical digestion, that is going to indicate that you have muscles that are involved. You have to have some sort of muscle action that is going to aid or assist in the process of digesting the food. Chemical digestion, on the other hand, is going to be an acid or an enzyme or some chemical means of taking the food and breaking it down into smaller pieces. So when we look at the mouth is actually going to employ both chemical as well as mechanical digestion. And how it accomplishes this, the teeth, you have your masseter muscle, variety of other muscles within the jaw and cheeks, which are going to open and close your jaw and help to crush and grind down any food that you guys have put in your mouth. Now, through that process, there's a lot of things happening that we really don't think about or consider. Number one, The positioning of your teeth is very important. If you think about the teeth that you have at the front of your mouth, those are your thin, narrow teeth. And then at the back of the mouth, we're going to have our broad, flat teeth. So that when you go to bite into your food, you have those thin teeth up front, which are going to basically cut through the food, tear it away from the source so that you can pull it into your mouth. Once you get it in your mouth, now you're going to use a combination of the tongue and the teeth to help break down that food by chewing it. Now, the tongue is very important because the tongue, and we really don't even realize it's doing it because it's so good at its job, it is constantly, every time that you go through the chewing action, it is pushing the food and realigning it to get it in between those big, broad, flat teeth. So that the next time you clamp down with your jaw, you have as much food as possible lined up between those teeth. And when you mash down, you are grinding that food because every time that you chew and bite through that food, you are exposing large surface area, which is actually going to help with the process of digestion. So that tongue plays a very important role in getting everything positioned, keeping it between the teeth so that you can maximize that process of chewing. Now, that is the mechanical side of things because you're using those muscles to open and close the jaw. You're using the tongue to move and push the food around so that you can get it lined up properly. You also have your salivary glands, which are